Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Gopi Janavalabha, Jaya Givaradhari, Jaya Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana, Jaya Brajajankanjana, Yashodanandana, Jaya Brajajanaranja, Yamunatira Vanachari, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Yamunatira Vanachari, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha, Jaya Giri Varadhari, Jaya Giri Varadhari, Yashodanandana, Jaya Brajajanaranja, Yashodanandana, Jaya Brajajanaranja, Yamunatiravanachari, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Yamunatiravanachari, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Kunja Vihari. Om Jnanatabandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pucharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Today we're covering the second part of chapter 4. And it's been a few weeks since we've met. I've had a few different other commitments come up. We're getting ready for our move to India. So we've been quite busy and regretfully haven't been able to meet, but thankfully this weekend's rather peaceful. I'm here in Wisconsin with my parents, my family, and so just joining on Zoom for today. I hope the connection's good enough. Seems like my internet's stable, so we'll just see how it goes. Hi, good to see you, Sierra. Hare Krishna. Looks like you got Josh there with you too. Jai, Hari Bol. Great, thanks for tuning in. All right, so I'll do a little recap because it's been a couple weeks and the Bhagavad-gita can be a little bit overwhelming when you first pick it up because it seems like Krishna is talking about all these different topics and it's hard to really follow the thread. But really the theme that we're on right now is sacrifice. And back in chapter 3, Krishna explained that everyone must perform some kind of sacrifice. When Krishna uses the word sacrifice or yajna, he's not talking about like a fire sacrifice. Like in the Jewish tradition, they would offer, or also you see in Islam, they offer animals in sacrifice to God. Krishna is not talking about that. He's talking about the act of sacrificing one's energies for a higher cause, giving something up in order to attain something higher. This is sacrifice. And Krishna introduced this topic in the 3rd chapter because Arjuna was wondering, what's better? Is it better to just give up activity altogether and try to understand the absolute truth and free myself completely from this material energy by not doing anything at all? Or is it better to do my prescribed duty, my dharma, my work, and try to elevate myself through selfless service? And Krishna's answer was the second one. We should all do our prescribed duty, whatever is our responsibility in this lifetime, both on the material platform and ultimately on the spiritual platform. We should try to act for a higher cause, act for Krishna's pleasure by using the energy of this body to elevate our consciousness and carry us to a higher destination in the next life. This is progressive human life. Most people are just trying to guarantee some level of happiness in the present lifetime. Their focus is totally on this one lifetime. But imagine if you're driving a car and your gaze is only on 10 feet in front of you. You're not paying any attention to anything beyond 10 feet in front of your car. And you're cruising 70 miles an hour. This is going to be really dangerous because when you're driving, you need to know what's way out on the road ahead. You need to be paying attention. Is there a car accident? Are people slowing down? You need to know what your destination is. You need to have some GPS coordinates or a map, some way that you're navigating your life. Similarly, the human life is not meant to just accumulate some temporary short-term happiness. It's meant to utilize this short human life to attain eternal life, spiritual life. This is the call of the Vedas. It's calling us to a higher way of thinking than the ordinary, more animalistic way of thinking, where we're just thinking about immediate pleasures and bare survival. So that's the life of sacrifice. And sacrifice, Krishna explains in the 3rd chapter, is born out of prescribed duties, which are given in the Vedas. This means that when we align our life with the Vedic teachings, we say, okay, I'm not going to do these things. I'm going to do these things. I'm not going to just blindly follow the dictates of my mind and senses. I'm going to regulate that. According to my level, I'm going to slowly reduce my involvement with materialistic pleasure, and I'm going to gradually cultivate spiritual pleasure in the form of hearing about Krishna, talking about Krishna, serving Krishna, chanting Hare Krishna, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and so on. Gradually going away from the temporary and towards the eternal. This is in gist what we're doing. And that's sacrifice, because we have to give something up. It requires some discipline. Now, Krishna is taking that topic back up in this present chapter, chapter 4. And he's explaining more about himself, because he's explaining the topic of transcendental knowledge, and the goal of sacrifice. The goal of sacrifice is to become enlightened, to get actual perception of the nature of this world and the nature of the Supreme Being and the nature of our very selves. So how does that knowledge come? It comes in disciplic succession, parampara. That was the first point that Krishna made at the beginning of chapter 4. And then he talks about the qualification a person has to have to be a student, to be a disciple, to be a devotee. They need to have some discipline. They need to have some degree of submission to God, that I want to know who God is. Not that I'm going to figure it all out on my own, but that I accept there is such a thing as higher authority. There are people who know more than I do. And Krishna also explains more about himself as the Supreme Being. And then he explains the difference between action that is binding and action that's liberating. And then the characteristics of a person who's on this path of transcendental sacrifice. So this is all the first half of the 4th chapter. So now in this next part of the 4th chapter, which is verses 25 through 29, he's going to explain the different types of sacrifice. So that's where we're going to start. There's a tendency to, in any organization or group, to try to make, to reduce differences, because differences can be uncomfortable for people. There's a kind of illusion of security when everyone around me is doing the same things that I'm doing. Then I feel comfortable, because I can bolster my own sense of success by saying, yeah, I'm doing what everyone else is doing. It's kind of like a herd mentality. But actually, in reality, we all have so many differences, and we need to honor those differences and honor our current level of spiritual advancement in order to avoid making mistakes. Because if we're too concerned with what others are doing, we may either try to practice at a higher level than where we're at and struggle, or we may actually hold ourselves back by not going beyond our current capacity and striving to attain a higher level of consciousness. So both problems can arise. If we compare ourselves too much to others, we need to be very concerned mostly with our own spiritual practices. And it's helpful to have a community to support us and to practice with, to practice together. But we're going to see in this section how much variety there is within spiritual life, because Krishna is going to list all these different ways people practice sacrifice. Just one more point I'll make before we get into the verses is that even in bhakti, where the goal is clearly one, we all want to develop love of Krishna. That's the purpose of bhakti yoga. That's the purpose of human life, given in the Vedas, given in the Bhagavatam. We want to develop love of God. Still, there's a lot of different ways to do that. Prahlad Maharaj gives 9 ways. And those 9 ways are just a synthesis, or a, let's say, the essence of unlimited ways to connect with Krishna. Beginning with hearing and chanting, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, remembering Krishna. Now, this doesn't mean that there's a kind of anything goes approach. There are certain universals in bhakti, but still we need to be able to appreciate the diversity, appreciate that different devotees are going to have a somewhat different approach, a unique personalized approach, and we need to accommodate that and also develop that within ourselves, that we're not just mechanically blindly going through the motions of spiritual life, but that we're genuinely connecting with our practice on a personal level, that this is inspiring to me because I value these things about my spiritual practice. I am excited about my goals in spiritual life. Yes, there's the goal of life like prema, love of God, but what are my goals? Do I have a sense of who Krishna is to me? It's going to be within the umbrella framework that's given by our acharyas, our teachers, and the scriptures. That's how we know that we're on the right track, is because our approach to spiritual life, our conception of spiritual life is fits within the framework of the teachings of our previous acharyas. At the same time, we need to have a personal connection to it in order to go deep within our practice and not just stay on the superficial external level, mechanically applying ourselves to the thing. In other words, we need to invest our identity, our entire sense of self into bhakti. That everything that I am is Krishna centered. So it has to encompass all aspects of our life. And that's going to look different for every individual because we're not just machines, we're not just carbon copies of each other. So Krishna is going to give different types of sacrifice. We'll jump into it now. He starts in text 25. He's just listing off different ways, different people offer sacrifice and make spiritual advancement. And ultimately, they attain the same goal of self-realization in these different ways. So he says in text 25, some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. Another way of understanding this is in terms of a ladder, right? So when we say everyone attains the same destination through the process of sacrifice, it may be that they're practicing at one level, like for example, offering worship to the demigods. And then over time, they realize these demigods are actually dependent on a higher authority, Krishna. So let me worship that higher authority. Like Krishna explains in the 7th chapter, he says that ultimately the benedictions given by the different demigods are coming from me alone. Prabhupada mentions that those who worship demigods are called Bahvishvara Vadi. That means Bahu Ishvara Vadi. Their philosophy is that there's multiple controllers. So it's only a complete, it's only a partial view. It's not a complete view of reality. They can understand that there's different authorities, like the different demigods that control the various elements, that control the various senses. But this is just a partial view because ultimately beyond the demigods, there's a supreme authority. Still, where they're practicing at their level, they're making some progress. It's better to accept some authority and offer sacrifice to that authority, even if it's just a demigod, than to claim that there's no such thing as authority at all, or that I am the supreme authority of my life. And the next type mentioned in this verse is the Brahmavadis. They worship the supreme impersonal form the impersonal manifestation of God. Okay, moving on to text 26. Sorry, just 1 second. 1 second. All right. So text 26. Some, the adulterated brahmacharis, sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control. And others, the regulated householders, sacrifice the objects of senses into the fire of the senses. So this verse gets into the followers of the Varnashram system. So this is another system of sacrifices following the prescribed duties given in the Vedas for the 4 orders of life and the 4 occupations. That's brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas, and shudra, vaishya, kshatriya, and brahmana. Later in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna is going to give more description of the different responsibilities of these different types of people. And today, it's difficult to find good examples of these different roles. All of the ashramas and all of the varnas are struggling. But we can glean the essence by understanding the basic duties, the basic principles that are meant to be applied in each of these orders of life, phases of life. So for brahmacharis, in student life, we're meant to learn how to control our senses. We're meant to learn how to accept authority and recognize authority that's worth following versus persons who are just in a position of authority but don't actually conduct themselves in the manner of a true leader. And learning. In student life, we're meant to learn how to live in the world and also the basic principles of the science of spiritual knowledge, of bhakti. Then in householder life, one of the main duties is having and raising children, and another is giving in charity, because it's the householders that are meant to support the other 3 ashrams, the students, the retired vanaprasthas, and the sannyasi travelers and teachers. Then one big theme so you see even in ISKCON, it's the householders that are supporting the temples. So this is a perfect example of how the householders are fulfilling their duty, and by sacrificing some of their wealth, then they're uplifting themselves. They're purifying themselves in that way. Hey, she needs me? I'm in a class. Can you give her? It's okay. Can you give her to her mom?
Okay.
That's okay. No problem. No problem. Yamuna's sad. My daughter. She's upset because she wanted to be with me. So, Hare Krishna. What to do, huh? So then in Vanaprastha life, one of the main duties is austerity, because eventually we need to burn up all material desire. The purpose is to give up all sense of wanting to be comfortable and happy in the material sense. And it may sound kind of intimidating or even impersonal if we try to take it on all at once. But actually, over time, it becomes more and more apparent that this material body is ultimately a source of suffering, that this body ultimately will die. And what that means is it can never provide the happiness that we're seeking, because as souls, we're seeking eternal pleasure. The Vedas say raso vaisaha, that the Supreme Lord is pleasure, rasa, and the living entities are part and parcel of that pleasure. So we're pleasure seeking by nature, and we'll never fulfill our pleasure seeking tendency in material existence, bodily existence, conditioned, materially embodied existence in this material world. That's why in some places the body is called dukkha, the giver of pain. And this becomes more apparent as people get older, because they're struck with disease, old age, the body becomes less physically fit or capable, and ultimately the body dies. So the retired phase of life is meant for austerity, for simplifying our life and really paring down to the bare necessities so that we have the maximum time for spiritual advancement. And we really burn up we give up entirely the idea that my pleasure, my happiness, my fulfillment is coming through this physical body, but it's only coming through Krishna and the activities of the soul, because that's who I am. Then in sannyas, which is a phase of life that not everyone may externally adopt. It's not exactly necessary, especially in Kali Yuga, but it kind of takes the practices and principles of Vanaprastha, the retired phase of life, the austere phase of life, to the next degree of magnitude. And it also incorporates teaching, that teaching to others, giving to others, transcendental knowledge. So anyone can understand these general principles and apply them in their life. The Varnas, the other four, like what, well, actually, Krishna doesn't get into that yet, so we probably will skip that for now. Krishna doesn't get into the four Varnas, Shudra, Vaishya, etc. So we'll just postpone that for now. But it works in the same way, that if we just kind of extract the principles, then we can kind of find a way to apply these Vedic teachings in our life. So in student life or brahmacharya, one controlling the senses by hearing about Krishna. And then in household life, one's controlling the senses through regulation by restricting one's tendency to just want to enjoy unlimitedly. And this particularly applies to sex. So in the book Krita Kalpataru, there's one author who's given 4 different types of celibacy. And it begins with only having sex with one's spouse. And then the next step is to only have sex on certain appropriate days. Like, for example, on Krishna Janmashtami, maybe you'd avoid all types of sexual intimacy on that day. Or on Ekadashi, you'd avoid it also. Then the third type is to only have sex on days that the wife is considered to be fertile. Specifically, it says days after the menstrual period. And the fourth is that only for the sake of having children. That's the fourth and most advanced stage of celibacy. But it's all considered to be celibacy, even at the very beginning, just to be in a monogamous relationship with one's spouse. So it's important to understand that there's a spectrum. It's not just black and white. And that's an essential part of household life, and it applies to all types of sense control. Like, for example, what we eat. The first step of controlling our tongue would be to offer everything to Krishna. And then the next step would be, I'm going to only offer to Krishna, and I'm going to do offerings at specific times, for example. And then later, let's say like in Vanaprastha life, one may even control how much one's eating. Like, I'm only going to eat this much because if I eat more than that, I feel tired, or I can tell that my body's not able to digest it anymore, things like that. So there's a gradual approach to sense control, and the process of sacrifice is like that. There's gradations in intensity, and so we want to apply the level of intensity that's appropriate for our current level. Then let's go on to 27. Some control. This is advanced Ashtanga yogis. They're following the system outlined by Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. They control the mind and senses, they control the life breath, and they sacrifice all of their sensual and mental energy into the process of samadhi. And then in text 28, Krishna outlines 4 more types of sacrifice: following strict vows, giving in charity, practicing the beginning stages of mystic yoga, and studying scripture. So Prabhupada writes in his purport, all these yogis are faithfully engaged in different types of sacrifice and are seeking a higher status of life. Krishna consciousness, however, is different from these because it is the direct service of the Supreme Lord. Krishna consciousness cannot be attained by any one of the above mentioned types of sacrifice, but can be attained only by the mercy of the Lord and his devotees. Therefore, Krishna consciousness is transcendental. The idea is that when one gradually goes through these different types of sacrifice, they ultimately come to the stage of bhakti. That this is the most complete mode of worship, because it's involving, one way we can appreciate this is that in all these other types of sacrifice, I'm just giving some external energy, like sacrificing my breath, or I'm sacrificing my eating, or I'm sacrificing my money. But in bhakti, I'm actually sacrificing my I'm giving my whole self, the very essence of myself, my heart, in service to the Lord. So it's the most complete of all sacrifices because it's actually on the level of the soul. Sierra, did you want to add something? You said say something? Okay. Nice to see you guys. I hope the background noise isn't too bad. The kids are hanging out in the backyard.
Not bad at all. Actually, I don't know if ours is, but
no, everything's good.
Okay, Zoom's really good then now.
Nice. Okay, so yeah, the natural bhakti is the culmination of all types of sacrifice because it's the activity of the soul in relation to God, basically. And when we're doing karma yoga, we're engaging our work in service to God. When we're doing Jnana yoga, we're trying to approach God through knowledge. But in bhakti yoga, it's our very soul, that our very self. We're offering who we are, what we are to Krishna, and accepting that I'm a subordinate being to God. So it's some other traditions call bhakti the like path of submission and mercy. So all these types of sacrifice that Krishna is explaining, they all lead to transcendental knowledge, but we can understand them like stages on a ladder, steps on a ladder that are leading to the top. But still, we should be able to respect people, any type of religious practitioner, spiritual practitioner, anyone who's doing any noble activity, we should be able to appreciate that for what it is and encourage them in that without judging a person thinking that they should be on a different level than where they are. So then in 29, Krishna just giving more different types of sacrifice. Specifically, this is controlling the breath and giving up eating and things like that. So one may practice different of these. It's not that one can only do one. A person might choose to have a variegated practice that incorporates all these different types of yoga. But again, it's ultimately going to conclude in bhakti because this is the highest expression of sacrifice in relation to God, is on the level of the soul. And Krishna next, from text 30 onward, is going to get into explaining the result of sacrifice, that the more we give ourselves to God, the more we gain understanding of the nature of this world. Because the underlying energy of this material world is avidya, or ignorance. That's what perpetuates the sense that I am this physical body, and that when this body dies, I will stop existing. All animals think that inherently. That's why they're so terrified of death. But a human being can overcome the fear of death because they realize that when the body dies, I will continue to exist. This is the beginning of transcendental knowledge, is understanding that I'm an eternal transcendental being. I'm a soul. I'm not this physical body. And the more we bring our activities to this transcendental platform, that I'm going to act in a way that is pleasing to God, I'm going to, rather than spending my time hearing about the news or hearing about sports or different topics, I'm going to hear about God and try to understand and hear about God's devotees and engage my mind in these transcendental topics. Then the more we are freed from the influence of avidya or ignorance, and the more we attain transcendental knowledge, and we get a clear perspective of what is this reality that I'm in? What is this world? What is the nature of this world? What's happening here? So then Krishna is explaining that regardless of what type of sacrifice a person does, if they actually offer that to him, then they will, the result of that, the reward of that will be transcendental knowledge. And by being situated in knowledge, one naturally becomes peaceful and happy because they become free from fear. They become free from anger. They become free from resentment and all of the unwanted things that come along with the bodily concept of life. So then Krishna's explaining, without sacrifice, one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. What then of the next? This is text 31. That sacrifice is so essential, a person can't even maintain their body without it. What to speak of progress on the spiritual path? Sacrifice is essential. And then he says in text 32, all these different types of sacrifices are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. Knowing them as such, you will become liberated. So there's a variety of paths. This is what we were explaining at the outset, that there's a variety of paths that are approved in the Vedas. And we may find different of these processes to be helpful at different stages of our development. Even Sanatana Goswami, one of the direct disciples of Lord Chaitanya, he would do a little bit of pranayama. This is breath work, pranayama, before he would chant his japa. He would do a little bit of pranayama to help still and quiet his mind and bring his mind and heart into the right state to approach the holy name. We can maybe say it's similar to how a person may, will take a bath and then put on clean cloth before they go and worship the deity, because they're getting into the right mood, the right to approach the Lord. So there's different processes given in the Vedas, and different people will find them helpful at different times. And if some people are more attracted to certain types of sacrifice than us, we don't need to judge them or condemn them. We should just appreciate that they're trying to worship the same supreme being that I love and adore. This is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur recommends, that Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, if I see someone worshiping God in a different way than my own methods, my own approach, then I should appreciate that they're praying to the same supreme being that I'm praying to. They're trying to develop a relationship with the same supreme being that I love and adore. And it doesn't mean that we then reduce all differences and say, okay, it's all one, that everyone is equally, all approaches are equally potent. Because ultimately, Krishna will say later in the Bhagavad-gita, Bhaktyaham vijanati, yavan yaschagni tatvata. I can only be known in full by bhakti. Pranayama cannot yield complete knowledge of God. Karma yoga cannot yield complete knowledge of God. Only bhakti can. So this is an important principle, that even as we're able to respect all different types of spiritual practitioners, we're not kind of, we're still able to discern which ones are more effective. You know, it's like rungs on the ladder. You wouldn't say that the bottom of the ladder is the top, but still, as soon as somebody's on the ladder, you can appreciate, okay, you know, they're making progress in the right direction. That's the idea. All right. Now, in this last section of the chapter, which is really text 33 or 34 till the end, Krishna is explaining the method and the results of transcendental knowledge. In text 33, which is leading into this last section, he explains that sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than a sacrifice that's done without real understanding. Inevitably, a person will start out on whatever is their spiritual practice. They'll start out with a less developed understanding of what it is that they're doing. They'll just kind of go through the motions. And that's good in the beginning. You know, to pray to God without really understanding who God is, or maybe even accepting that God exists in fully, is a good start. To give in charity is a good practice, even if a person doesn't understand exactly why it's or why it's necessary. But it's good. Just like if you eat your vegetables, you'll be healthy, whether or not you understand all of the vitamins and minerals that they contain and how they nourish the body and so on. By just having a balanced diet, it's good, whether you understand how it's working or not. But the best thing is to have knowledge, because then you'll be able to apply your practice in the best way. There's a lot less chance that you'll err if you actually understand what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, etc. And Krishna's explaining here that actually when you approach him with any type of sacrifice that's prescribed in the Vedic scriptures or any genuine scripture, then naturally that will lead you to knowledge, like we already described. He says all sacrifices culminate in transcendental knowledge. So now one might ask, well, how do I get this knowledge? Where do I go? Who do I ask? And so then in text 34, and this begins kind of the last section of this chapter, Krishna is explaining the method of gaining knowledge. And he says, approach a spiritual master. We need to find people who embody the spiritual goal that we want to attain. And we want to learn from them and follow their directions and serve them. And by hearing from them and following their directions, then we can come to the same level, same goal where they're at. The purpose of spiritual life isn't to just remain perpetually a novice or beginner. In any discipline, you want to begin as a novice and have a teacher, and then gradually become more and more adept and proficient. And throughout the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna is explaining the different qualities that one will begin to exhibit as they advance in self-realization. So he's already described in the second chapter, for example, what are the symptoms of a self-realized person. And now he's telling Arjuna, if you want to know the science of sacrifice, you want to know the science of yoga, you want to understand transcendental knowledge, you should approach a spiritual master. Somebody who has seen the truth, who understands the absolute truth, and who can, because such a person can impart that same transcendental vision to you. It's like somebody who's gone on a journey. If they've gone on a journey, they've traversed that path, then they can tell you how to get to the same place that they went to. They can say, okay, so you follow this for 100 miles, and then you're going to see a big water tower. You take a ride, and you're going to pass through a valley, and then you go to get to a river. You're going to follow the river north. They give you all the directions because they've been there. They've traversed that same path. So by approaching such a person, then we can also attain the same goal, the same spiritual goal that they have attained. And Rupa Goswami, who is another student of Lord Chaitanya, he explains that the whole path of bhakti begins with this process of approaching a spiritual master. He says, Adao Guru Padashraya. In the beginning, you approach a guru and you take shelter of the guru. Just as a child takes shelter of a parent. When a child is in difficulty, they have no way of helping themselves. So they have to go to a parent and say, please help me. Please help me. I need help. So in the same way, a person who's in material life, we don't know how to help ourselves perfectly. We don't know how to get out of this material dilemma that we're in. I'm in a material body. I'm a spiritual being in a material body. How did that happen? How do I get out of that problem that I'm in? So then we need to approach a guru who's already out, who's already beyond the physical body. They're already a self-realized being, and they'll be able to help us attain that same state. Now, what's the result? How do we know that we've actually properly heard from a guru and we've received the teachings that the guru wants to give? Krishna explains in the subsequent verses that we'll have no more illusion. We'll have no more attachment or identification with the material body. We'll understand I'm a spiritual being. We'll have equal vision. We'll be able to recognize all living entities are spiritual beings like me. And we'll have no more karmic reactions. And we'll be completely pure. This is in verses 35 through 38. Complete purity means internally, primarily internal purity. What that means is free from all forms of vice, which cause us to ultimately to envy other living beings and to envy God. And then one might ask, does a person need to be special? Like, do I need to take birth in India? Or do I need to have a special kind of education or a degree? So Krishna says, no. This knowledge is so potent and powerful. It's like fire. Just as fire can burn anything, you can throw anything into a fire, and if the fire is hot enough, it will burn it to ashes. Even stone can melt if the fire is hot enough. The fire of transcendental knowledge is so pure and so potent that even the lowest of persons, even a great sinner, if they take up this process, then they can also attain the same result. The only requirement is faith, that we need to have faith in the Supreme Being and faith in the process of sacrifice, that there is such a goal as God realization, God consciousness. And then if we have faith in that, then we naturally will apply ourselves to that. One other point that's important to note is Krishna uses the word kalena. Kalena means in course of time. One who has become accomplished in this practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. So we should understand that we won't attain results overnight. Just like if you want to follow a diet, you know, if you try a diet for 3 days and you don't lose very much weight, you may become discouraged and quit. But if you understand that it's actually the diet is meant to give results over the course of 3 to 6 months, then you know that this is well, just because I haven't seen results in 3 days, that doesn't mean that it's not working. It just means I need to keep doing it, stick it out. Or if you're sick and you take some medicine given by a doctor, just because you don't feel better immediately, the very moment that you take the medicine, it doesn't mean the medicine's not working. Everything takes its own time. So similarly with the process of bhakti, we need to be faithful enough and committed enough to actually apply the process in our life over a long period of time. And then we'll see results. I mean, imagine how much time a student invests in their education from the age of 5 or 6 until the age of 20, 21, 22. 15 years before they really get the reward of their education, which is graduation and the ability to work in the world and maintain themselves, to earn a livelihood for themselves or their family. That's a long time. That's a long investment. But throughout one's education, one gets some benefit, immediate benefit, even though it's not the supreme benefit of graduation. So similarly, in bhakti, one gets confirmation throughout the different stages of their practice as they advance that I'm on the right path. This is working. This is good for me. And it's worth continuing. It's like the process of the sunrise. The sun doesn't just all of a sudden it goes from pitch black to the sun being in the high noon, the full daylight. It's a gradual process. So similarly, we will see a gradual increase in understanding of Krishna and the soul and all these different topics, and a gradual decrease of interest in materialistic pleasure and materialistic life. And these things they're simultaneously symptoms of faith, and also they will nourish our faith. So faith is the essential qualification for the practice of bhakti. Krishna warns that a person who doesn't have faith, then it just won't work. It won't work. You can't progress. That faith is the beginning. Adau Shraddha. What that means is that those who are doubtful, they're faithless, they won't seriously apply the teachings. They won't apply them with sincerity. We may externally make a show of chanting, but if we don't actually have faith, then only our lips will be chanting, but our mind will be doing all these other things, thinking, why am I wasting my time? When can I stop? When can I go back and eat a cheeseburger or whatever it is that I'm gonna wish I could be doing instead of this stupid chanting. If I don't have faith, then that's what my mind will be doing. But if I have faith, then when I'm chanting, I'll be so grateful. Wow, I'm so grateful that I get to have such a simple process that I don't need to go live in a cave somewhere. I can just live a normal life, but give a certain portion of my day to my daily chanting of Hare Krishna, my daily japa, my sadhana. And simply by doing that, over time, I will gradually develop more and more attraction, more and more taste. So Krishna lists three different types of disqualification. The first he lists is agya. This means a foolish person, that they're just too enamored with materialistic life. They're too animalistic or addicted to the materialistic pleasure that they can't control themselves at all. They can't even take the time out of their sense gratification to put their hands in a bead bag and chant or go to a kirtan. They're just too enamored and intoxicated with materialistic pleasure and the materialistic life. Then there's ashraddhana. This is a person who's faithless because of the apparent contradictions that they see in religious paths. So they don't have the maturity or the faith to appreciate that God has given different paths, different religions, different processes to accommodate different types of people. So they focus too much on the apparent contradiction. Then the next is called samshayatma, one who's doubtful that the process will work for them. They say, maybe others can do it, but it won't work for me. I'm too this or I'm too that, Their heart is filled with doubts. Their mind is filled with doubts. So we should be careful not to fall victim to any of these three types of categories. Being agya, ashraddhana, or samshayatma, being too animalistic in our mentality, too much of just living a burdensome life and thinking that, eat, drink, and be merry is the only philosophy that we should think about. Ashraddhana, that means faithless due to seeing apparent contradictions. And then samshayatma is doubtful that the process will work for me. We should know, I'm a soul. This process works for all souls. There is no soul that is immune to bhakti. The eternal nature, eternal function of every soul is bhakti. It will work for everyone. So Krishna concludes the chapter saying that one who acts in devotional service, renouncing the fruit of his action, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is factually situated in the self. Thus, he is not bound by the reactions of work, O conqueror of riches. Because previously in this chapter, he was explaining how, what is the type, there's work that is binding and work that is liberating. So the ultimate conclusion of that is one who is situated in transcendental knowledge, having attained that transcendental knowledge by submission to a guru and performing the process of sacrifice that the guru has prescribed, that person is free from all reactions to his work. There's no more karma that will bind that person. And then he concludes the chapter with the final verse. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed with the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharat, stand and fight. So this is really nice because Krishna is exhibiting the ideal characteristics of a teacher, which is that they need to find some way to connect the subject matter with the student's interests. They need to make it relatable. So here, Krishna is employing the language of war. He's comparing knowledge to a weapon. And he's comparing the process of yoga to a battle. Stand and fight. It's simultaneously literal because he's saying, fight in this war, but also he's saying, fight the senses. And he's saying armed with yoga and with the weapon of knowledge. So Arjuna is a warrior. And so Krishna is using this language to make it relatable and inspires enthusiasm in Arjuna. Similarly, when Srila Prabhupada was once talking with some of the leaders at the Ford Motor Company in Detroit, he talked about cars with them for a long time, and then he started to explain how the body is like a car and the soul is like a driver. So when we're sharing Krishna consciousness with others, or even when we're just trying to preach to our own mind to reaffirm our dedication and work out areas of that lack clarity or confusion, we need to find ways that we can connect to the practice. This is what I was trying to get at earlier, explaining how the process is meant to be personal. What are my interests? What are my strengths? How can I connect that to the process of Krishna consciousness? There's one devotee, one disciple of Srila Prabhupada. She's working on a book, a memoir, and she's always been interested in theater. So now she wants to write a book where she talks some about her life and also some about how Krishna is the perfection of theater, because Krishna is performing leelas, dramatic pastimes with his associates. And Krishna manifests himself in different avatars or different roles to perform different dramatic pastimes. It's theater brought to life. It's where the line between drama and reality is no longer it's broken, it's blurred at least. And it's broken, that this is reality, it's Krishna's dramatic pastimes. In one sense, our whole material life is just a drama, it's just a role play. This that I think of myself as Luke van der Linden, this and this and that. It's all just a role that I'm playing right now. It's temporary. But what's my real identity? That's my identity in Krishna Lila or in Gora Lila, in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes or in Krishna's pastimes. These are my real identities, the roles that I play in those dramas, where in my current drama, I'm the central figure. I think I'm the protagonist. The joke is everyone's thinking they're the protagonist. Everyone's thinking I'm the most important character in this drama right now. Everyone. It's a little bit humorous. I'm thinking they're my supporting actors. They're thinking I'm their supporting actor. My mother and my father, I'm just their son. They're the main person, the protagonist, the main character in their drama. And I'm the main character in mine. But spiritual life means Krishna is the protagonist and I'm supporting him. That's Krishna consciousness. So in this way, whatever our interests are, we can find some way to connect Krishna. Maybe music. Maybe we like music. Or maybe we like art. Or we like war. Even we like to fight. Here we can understand that knowledge is the best of weapons, is knowledge. Because with knowledge we can protect ourselves from the greatest of enemies, ignorance and lust, and so on. So these are some ways we can meditate and reflect, and also try to help others by finding some way to connect these principles with their natural inclinations. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and for Sierra, Josh, and for anyone who happens to watch online. Are there any reflections, comments, questions you want to share?
Hi, Krishna. Hopefully you can hear me. That everyone has kind of like, you have a good understanding of Krishna from like the Shastra in some regards, that everyone kind of has their own relationship with Krishna. It's kind of like your own personal connection or understanding. And it made me think of like, obviously some think of him as like their child, and some think of him as lover, and as their lover, and so on. It was really sweet that Krishna does that. And I really like that you ended with this devotee, which I'd love to know about, this book that she's writing about Cedar. Cedar was also part of my life growing up. So just like hearing that, and then really getting to understand, like, it's true, our egos are so funny that we think that we're the protagonist, and really that Krishna is, and we're the supporting roles. It's just like really nice to do that. And then also like this chapter being about the yoga ladder, right? Got it? Because we're really hitting on that, and kind of really deep to like, I'm doing the cow cuddling now, and so like we get deep sometimes. I didn't realize like sometimes the preaching gets a little bit heavier than I thought, and I was like, oh, which isn't bad. It's just learning how to talk to everyone no matter where they're at, and respecting them, and letting them have like a really nice time. At the same time, sharing like, here's this literature, and we're about simple living, higher thinking, and then we're like, oh, what does it mean to have higher levels of consciousness? And then it's like, ooh, man, these are some heated questions. And Krishna's like putting me in some places that I'm like not familiar with yet, but obviously kind of guiding me and seeing on what to say, because my heart is kind of feeling like, oh, maybe that's a little too much, or that's, so I'll just, it kind of just comes off my tongue. I don't really know how to explain it, but thankfully, chapter 12 of the Bhagavada-gita really is really resonant, that like, to fully surrender, or blah, 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 maybe just try to be in the most goodness, and do that, because spiritual life is actually kind of rare. It's a shastra to like really devote yourself and really be on this path of submission. So to understand, everyone who comes to cow cuddling isn't maybe going to become a devotee. However, they are devotees, and to like, and their truth is really Krishna consciousness. So to like kind of give them these little nuggets, it's really so sweet. So yeah, wherever they're at on that rung, on that ladder. And also, I know a lot of yogis too, so it's been a little conflicting sometimes, who like do these other practices, and they don't take bhakti very seriously, or they're like hanging around, but to kind of trust where they're at on their journey and their development, and that if they're even around, or anything like that, that it's highly potential that Krishna might have something else unfold for them, and just like have faith, that's what this stuff is. So thank you for your class. It's been really nice. I'm glad I joined. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thanks for your nice reflections. It's really a challenge to be able to meet people at their level. We want to just, mostly we just want to reciprocate with others that according to their degree of interest. And also, if we are really attuned to the super soul, like you were saying, praying, and Krishna's giving you the words to speak, then that's the best way that we can hope to act as an instrument to attract this person closer to Krishna. Krishna is the all-attractive person. And it's just a matter of the soul getting a taste of that beauty. Everyone likes a beautiful person. Like if a beautiful person comes and talks to you and they're very kind and you're like flattered. Wow, why are they showing this interest in me? How nice, you know, and you're very attentive, you're interested. So as a devotee becomes more Krishna conscious, they naturally are decorated with these good qualities and they have this like aura of attractiveness. Some of the very advanced devotees in our movement, they have that aura, that powerful energy that others find so compelling. And so when they speak, then other people listen because they have faith in this person just by their energy, the way they carry themselves. So the best thing that we can do is become as Krishna conscious as possible ourselves. And then we'll be in a position to act as a transparent medium for Krishna's mercy in the lives of others. And we also won't be bothered if other people don't want to follow Krishna's teachings in this lifetime. That's all right. That's their choice. Krishna himself gives them that freedom, that choice. And we just want to at least we take full advantage of the opportunity we have. And the more we do that, then the more we'll feel fully satisfied and grounded in our spiritual identity. And out of compassion, we want to share it with others. At the same time, this process requires a desire to participate. You know, that's like the essential thing. Bhakti's, you can't go through the motions. A lot of these other things, you can go through the motions of having a healthy diet. You can go through the motions of working out at the gym and you'll get the results. You'll get the results. You'll get a physically fit body just by going through the motions. This is what I was trying to express earlier when I said that bhakti is the most complete sacrifice. Because all these other things, you can go through the motions. You can externally follow the process and you'll get some results. But with bhakti, you can't just go through the motions. You won't get the complete results unless you actually put your heart into it, because it's the yoga of devotion. So we can't force people to do it. That's the point. There's no question of force. We need to somehow attract people. And that's what Krishna is doing. He comes to this world in so many forms to attract people. He performs his pastimes to attract people. He appears as the deity. He appears as the Bhagavatam. He appears in the form of prasadam to attract people. So we just want to somehow be instruments or be mediums of Krishna's all attractiveness in this world. And that's the best way we can bring people closer to Krishna. But yeah, it can't be forced. We really do have to be sensitive about others and respectful. Respect the autonomy of the living entity. Anyway, those are just some additional thoughts based on what you shared. So I'll conclude there. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you everyone so much. Shri Prabhupada ki jai, or Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Hare Krishna.